Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastitya Adeshatarne Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchakapatrulibhyas cha kripa sindhubhya evacha Patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, all the devotees ki jai, Haribol. So yes, great. Here we are again. Let's just give me a moment. I'll get my mouse. I'll use my mouse. Just a little more convenient for controlling things. Okay. Aha. So, yes. So we're beginning the 18th chapter. Actually, you know what? There's a little introduction in the Bhagavad Gita. There's a little introduction here to this last chapter. Let me read it. Krishna explains the meaning of renunciation and the effects of the modes of nature on human consciousness and activity. He explains Brahman realization, the glories of the Bhagavad Gita, and the ultimate conclusion of the Gita, which means the highest path of religion is absolute, unconditional, loving surrender unto Lord Krishna, which frees one from all sins, brings one to complete enlightenment, and enables one to return to Krishna's eternal spiritual abode. Right. So that's from the Gita itself. So, more than anything, this 18th chapter is really a summary and retrospect of the entire Bhagavad Gita, just like the second chapter was in advance of things, looking ahead. Now we're going to be looking back and summarizing. And in this way, bringing out the main themes in very focused ways. So basically all the subject matters which have been discussed are going to be revisited, and Lord Krishna will give his final opinion, final opinions, plural, on these different subjects, on a few. Not just the final conclusion as pure devotional service, but in regard to different things, as we'll see just now as an example. What about renunciation? What about renunciation? So, Krishna will give his final opinion on that, and a few other things. So in his purport, Srila Prabhupada in his purport for the first verse says, actually the Bhagavad Gita is finished in 17 chapters. Isn't that interesting? Bhagavad Gita is finished in 17 chapters. The 18th chapter is a supplementary summarization of the topics discussed before. In every chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna stresses that devotional service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the ultimate goal of life. This same point is summarized in the 18th chapter as the most confidential path of knowledge. So it's like that. Okay, that's fine. Let's have a look here. We have here, there are there's not 6 sections. There's 11 sections, would you believe? there are 11 sections in this 18th chapter. So let's just have a look at them. First of all, from verse 1 to verse 12, which is what we're going to read through tonight. The subject is, acting with detachment is true renunciation and brings freedom from reaction. Yes, so that's what we're going to be going through tonight. Then the second section is from verse 13 to verse 18. And there, the subject matter is the conclusion of Sankhya and Vedanta. Actions directed by the supersoul bring freedom from reaction. All right, so yeah, it's the conclusion of Sankhya and Vedanta. It's verses 13 to 18. Then again, from verse 19 to verse 40, the entanglement of the three modes. More about the three modes, and with different examples to illustrate how we may also get entangled in the three modes. Again, we've already read what in the 14th chapter, then the 17th chapter, and now here, it's more than 20 verses about being entangled in the modes in different ways. Yes, so then the fourth section is verse 41 to verse 48, and the subject matter there is worshipping the Lord through one's occupational duty is true renunciation and brings freedom from reactions. Yeah, so that's interesting. That's verse 41 to verse 48. Then the fifth section, verse 49 to verse 55, from Jnana Yoga to pure devotional service. The sixth section is verse 56 to verse 60, working in pure devotional service. Then the seventh section, very short, verse 61 to 63, surrender to the super soul. And the eighth section, verse 64 to 66, these are just super important verses, just about the most important you get. 64 to 66, the most confidential knowledge of all. Become a pure devotee of Krishna. That's what it is, the most confidential knowledge of all. Right, and then, what is it now? The ninth section, verse 67 to 71, preaching and studying Bhagavad Gita. Then the 10th section, verses 72 and 73, Arjuna is firmly fixed. Then, the last section in the chapter and in the entire Bhagavad Gita, verses 74 to 78, Sanjaya's prediction. Sure, it's a long chapter, it's 78 verses, it's really, it's big. So, okay, so let's get into it now, without further ado, as they say. First section is from verse 1 to verse 12, that's what we'll focus on tonight. I mean, if we get more time, we'll do more, but I suspect that's as far as we're going to get, which is fine. And so, yeah, from verse 1 to verse 12, acting with detachment is true renunciation and brings freedom from reaction. All right. So it's basically a summary of the discussion about whether to work or renounce, whether to work or try to cultivate knowledge, these types of ideas. But actually, basically, in most simple, clear terms, whether to work or renounce. And Krishna emphatically tells us that we must work. So there are three subsections here. The whole section is from verse 1 to 12. First subsection is from verse 1 to verse 6. And we call that the true sannyasi does not renounce action, but renounces the fruits of action. Okay, so verse 1 to verse 6, let's just read through the translations. Arjuna said, O mighty armed one, I wish to understand the purpose of renunciation, tyaga, and the renounced order of life, sannyas. O killer of the Keshi demon, master of the senses. Verse 2, the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, the giving up of activities that are based on material desire is what great learned men call the renounced order of life, sannyas. And giving up the results of all activities, and giving up the results of all activities is what the wise called renunciation. Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Two categories of people with pretty much slightly different ideas. Verse 3, some learned men declare that all kinds of fruitive activity should be given up as faulty. Yet other sages maintain that acts of sacrifice, charity, and penance should never be abandoned. Aha. Yes, we've been there, haven't we? And verse 4, O best of the Bharatas, now hear my judgment about renunciation. That's pretty clear, isn't it? Now hear my judgment about renunciation, O tiger among men. Oh no, sorry, it's a new sentence. O tiger among men, renunciation is declared in the scriptures to be of three kinds. Yes, well, you can take a guess what are those three kinds. We will find out in due course. And verse 5, acts of sacrifice, charity, and penance are not to be given up. They must be performed. Indeed, sacrifice, charity, and penance purify even the great souls. Wow. Okay. And then verse 6, which is the last verse in this subsection. All these activities should be performed without attachment or any expectation of result. They should be performed as a matter of duty, O son of Pritha. That is my final opinion. See, that's Krishna's final opinion. There you go. He's really being very emphatic. All right, so let's go back and go through the verses and the purports, starting with verse 1. Arjuna said, O mighty armed one, I wish to understand the purpose of renunciation, tyaga, And the renounced order of life, sannyas, O killer of the Keshi demon, master of the senses. Okay, so, well, okay. Let's have a look here. Well, we already read the beginning of the first purport, didn't we? The Bhagavad Gita is finished in 17 chapters, so we don't need to read that again. But basically, Srila Prabhupada is kind of summarizing what's come before, the different sections of Bhagavad Gita. First 6 chapters, stress was given to devotional service. Then in the second 6 chapters, pure devotional service discussed. In these third 6 chapters, knowledge, renunciation, the activities of material nature and transcendental nature, and devotional service were discussed. Right. So, and it's been concluded so far, Prabhupada says, everything should be done in relation to the Lord, as service to the Lord. Yeah, it's very consistent. So, now, in the second paragraph, well, it's Prabhupada again. He mentions how it's a summary like the second chapter. Okay. And then in the third paragraph, it's an interesting description here. In the verse, in the Sanskrit, 2 Sanskrit words were used to address or describe Lord Krishna. Rishikesh and Keshi Nishudana. Rishikesh is Krishna, the master of the senses, who, because he's the master of the senses, can always help us attain like peace, mental serenity, Prabhupada says, or peace. That's Rishikesh. But then Keshi Nishudana. Keshi Nishudana is referring to how, or describing Krishna as that person who can destroy all doubts, like he destroyed the Keshi demon and various other demons. So various doubts, any demon he could destroy, any doubt he can destroy. Just like Prabhupada explains, it's one of the last couple of chapters before he finished his translating and commenting on Srimad Bhagavatam. Prabhupada explains that it's not that just Krishna just killed the 20 or however many demons, that are described in Srimad Bhagavatam when he was in Vrindavan. Prabhupada explains Krishna killed many more, really many more. Prabhupada explains that actually Krishna was, every day he would go out and herd the cows, and just before lunch a demon would come and Krishna would kill the demon, and then they'd have lunch, and then they'd continue with their cow herding, and just before it's time to go home, another demon would come, a second demon, and Krishna would kill that demon. And even sometimes they went out early, just after breakfast, and Krishna would kill a demon early in the morning. And this was happening every single day. So Krishna, as Krishna can kill any doubt, there's no doubt that Krishna is not capable of killing. So just as Krishna killed any sort of demon, doesn't matter. He can kill any demon. So the idea is that Arjuna is expecting Krishna to kill, a final killing of some of his demons to really just make sure they're dead. Something like that, you could say. Verse 2, the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, the giving up of activities that are based on material desire is what great learned men call the renounced order of life, sannyas, and giving up the results of all activities, is what the wise call renunciation, tyaga. So, Krishna's saying that these are the opinions of two classes of people, the learned and the wise. They're not necessarily the same. And they're based on, their opinions are based on the meaning of the words, just in a sort of grammatical, in terms of how the words are derived. That sannyas just means the renounced order of life. And tyaga means to renounce. But of course there's a difference. It's not only that sannyasis can renounce. Others can renounce too. So therefore these two opinions, are not necessarily the same. I mean, obviously they're closely related, but they're not necessarily the same. Right. So Srila Prabhupada makes the point. Let's just have a look here. Just hang on a sec. Prabhupada says the performance of activities for results means material results, has to be given up. This is the instruction of Bhagavad Gita. But activities leading to advanced spiritual knowledge are not to be given up. This will be made clear in the next verses. Right, so, Prabhupada's making that point. And so, you see, you understand the two opinions here. One is that the first one of the learned men, you give up activities that are based on material desire. But the wise people who are a little different from the learned, they say that you give up the results. You give up the results of all activities. This is renunciation. You see, there's definitely a difference. One is you just give up activities based on material desire. You give up the activities. And the other is you give up the results of all activities. Right. All right. So, verse 3. Some learned men declare that all kinds of fruitive activity should be given up as faulty. Yet other sages maintain that acts of sacrifice, charity, and penance should never be abandoned. So again, it's two classes of people. Yeah. And basically, these two classes of people, are, they're basically the Gyanis and the Sankhya people. They say all kinds of fruitive activity should be given up as faulty. But others, the Karmis and Mimamsakas, and some others too, they maintain that acts of sacrifice, charity, and penance should never be given up. Yeah. So Prabhupada contrasts in the purport that for instance, it is said that an animal can be killed in a sacrifice, yet some maintain that animal killing is completely abominable. Although animal killing in a sacrifice is recommended in the Vedic literature, the animal is not considered to be killed. The sacrifice is to give a new life to the animal. Sometimes the animal is given a new animal life after being killed in the sacrifice, and sometimes the animal is promoted immediately to the human form of life. So you get these two opinions, as mentioned right at the beginning of the purport, that some of these people, learned people, say that animal killing is abominable, but others say that it's good, that the animal is not considered killed. Yeah. So it's interesting to note, Lord Krishna and Srila Prabhupada do not give opinions. They do not give opinions. All right, anyway. So now verse 4. O best of the Bharatas, now hear my judgment about renunciation. O tiger among men, renunciation is declared in the scriptures to be of three kinds. And Prabhupada, Prabhupada says twice that Krishna's opinion is final. Yeah. Krishna gives his judgment, which should be taken as final, and his word should be taken as final. Yeah, so, you better get the idea. This is it. Before, you might have thought there's flexibility. Now, there's just no flexibility at all. This is it. And Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, the Lord says that the process of renunciation should be considered in, three kinds. What does three kinds mean? In terms of the modes of material nature, of course. Yeah. The particular mode or modes in which renunciation is performed. Not all renunciation is equal. There's renunciation in the modes. So he's going to really get into it more, beginning with verse 7. But anyway, we continue here. 5. Acts of sacrifice, charity, and penance are not to be given up. They must be performed. Indeed, sacrifice, charity, and penance purify even the great souls. Right. So, and Prabhupada, of course, he elaborates on it that, yes, these activities must definitely be performed. And Prabhupada gives some examples from his own experience, and we have also followed in his footsteps, that he gives the example of a sannyasi performing a marriage ceremony. Normally such a thing is just not for sannyasis. But for the sake of purification, the sannyasi may have to do like that. Giving charity. Srila Baladev Vijayabhushan says, wise persons should never give up the obligatory activities, such as sacrifices, charity, and austerity, because they purify. They destroy the faults accumulated by repeated births. Through the knowledge arising within them, like a lotus blossoming from a root. So when you do sacrifice, charity, and austerity in Krishna consciousness, in service to the Lord, sacrificing for the Lord, giving to the Lord, accepting some austerity in order to serve the Lord better, then this stimulates knowledge to develop within your heart. And Baladev says, just like a lotus blossoming from its root. So, yeah. In a general sense, here and there throughout Bhagavad Gita, Krishna has said this a number of times. Directly, indirectly, one way or another. Yeah. And verse 6, all these activities should be performed without attachment or any expectation of result. They should be performed as a matter of duty, O son of Pritha. That is my final opinion. Yeah. So please don't come along and say, well, I've got another idea. Can we take another approach? Don't do that. So in other words, what does this mean? It means that material sacrifices must be stopped, but sacrifice in Krishna consciousness must continue. This is what is being said here. Krishna conscious activities purify the heart. Materialistic sacrifices, they don't necessarily purify the heart. Yeah. They may contaminate the heart in that one may think that we can enjoy life in this world in this way. Yeah, so anything which leads to devotional service should be accepted. That's the perfection of religion. And Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, a devotee of the Lord should accept any kind of work, sacrifice or charity, which will help him in the discharge of devotional service to the Lord. Okay, so verses 7 to 9 are discussing, well, it's the modes again, devotees. Renunciation in the modes. Yeah, that's important. Very important. So, Srila Prabhupada, well, let's read the verses, 3 verses, 7, 8, and 9. Renunciation in the modes. So 7, prescribed duties should never be renounced. If one gives up his prescribed duties because of illusion, Such renunciation is said to be in the mode of ignorance. Okay, so there are 3 verses, there are 3 modes, and each mode, beginning with ignorance, gets a verse. Previously, oftentimes, or maybe every time, but at least oftentimes, Lord Krishna started by discussing whatever it was, but in the mode of goodness. But interestingly enough, he starts here with the mode of ignorance. Right, so Prabhupada comments, work for material satisfaction has to be given up, but activities for spiritual advancement, like cooking for the Lord, must be done. Yeah, cooking and offering, and then accepting the remnants as prasad, it must be done. We're talking, of course, in the context of renunciation. So in that context, Prabhupada makes the point here in the purport that if you're a sannyasi, you shouldn't cook for yourself. You shouldn't cook for yourself. Yeah. It's too much like sense gratification. Yeah. And also, similarly, cooking for oneself is prohibited, but cooking for the Supreme Lord is not prohibited for a sannyasi or anyone who's renounced. Similarly, a sannyasi may perform a marriage ceremony to help his disciple in the advancement of Krishna consciousness. Sometimes the guru, I wouldn't say, well, at least in my own case, I generally don't, I've done it, but on a very few occasions, really arrange a marriage. I've suggested to a few devotees, why not this one? Something like that, if it seems like it might be a good idea. But anyway, sannyasi may get involved in these things to some degree to help the devotees. And if the sannyasi renunciate decides not to do that, because thinking that, this is, marriage, what is this? I'm a sannyasi, I can't have anything to do with marriage. But if, to help the disciples, the sannyasi or the spiritual master may help disciples become married, this is good. But if he says, no, this is, I'm a sannyasi, I'm a guru, I don't do this sort of thing. Prabhupada says here, he's acting in the mode of darkness. Yeah. So therefore, if someone renounces like this, it'll increase his ignorance or her ignorance and not help them come to knowledge. All right, so verse 8. Anyone who gives up prescribed duties as troublesome or out of fear of bodily discomfort is said to have renounced in the mode of passion. Such action never leads to the elevation of renunciation. Troublesome or out of fear of bodily discomfort. Okay. And Prabhupada makes interesting point in the purport that one who's in Krishna consciousness should not give up earning money out of fear that he's performing fruitive activities. Haribol. Anyway, I don't do that. But if devotees donate something, we use it in Krishna service. Like, I'll just give you an example in terms of myself. Watch this. You saw that. right? I'm using equipment bought with money that the devotees have donated. Yeah. Including, good cameras, so everything looks, really nice and up to a good standard, which Krishna deserves. Yeah. So I wasn't working, but some Lakshmi was coming and we were using it. We've used this. We were using it to travel around before, but now we're not doing that, at least at this point. So now we're using it for our preaching under these circumstances. Right. And yeah. So this renunciation in the mode of passion never leads to the elevation of renunciation. Rather, as Prabhupada says as he concludes the purport, if a person renounces work in that spirit, he never gets the result of renunciation. That's pretty emphatic, pretty clear, isn't it? And verse 9, O Arjuna, when one performs his prescribed duty only because it ought to be done, and renounces all material association and all attachment to the fruit, his renunciation is said to be in the mode of goodness. Yeah. Which, here's an interesting little point. It's a little point, but it's an interesting little point. That this definition here of renunciation in the mode of goodness, it is very similar to verse 6. Yeah, in verse 6, what did Krishna say? All these activities should be performed without attachment or any expectation of result. They should be performed as a matter of duty, O son of Pritha. That is my final opinion. And here he's saying, O Arjuna, when one performs his prescribed duty only because it ought to be done and renounces all material association and all attachment to the fruit, his renunciation is said to be in the mode of goodness. So Srila Prabhupada comments here, prescribed duties must be performed with this mentality. One should act without attachment for the result. He should be disassociated from the modes of work. A man working in Krishna consciousness in a factory, can you believe it? Does not associate himself with the work of the factory, nor with the workers of the factory. He simply works for Krishna. And when he gives up the result for Krishna, he is acting transcendentally. Yeah, we've mentioned before, you may well have heard, how many years ago, in the 60s, right in the very early days of this movement, the great devotee Jayananda Prabhu was working as a taxi driver in order to earn money for the running of the temple. What do you think of that, devotees? He's working as a taxi driver for so many hours a day. But the money, he's living in the temple, he was the temple president, and the money is being used for running the temple. Yeah. So he wrote to Prabhupada and complained, Srila Prabhupada, I am in Maya. I'm driving all these materialistic people around so they can do their sinful activities. One man, I'm driving him to the hotel so he can drink liquor. Another man, I'm driving him to his girlfriend's place so he can engage in illicit sex life. This is what I'm doing. I'm just facilitating the material life of these conditioned souls. I'm in Maya. Of course, he was using the money for running the temple, and Prabhupada knew that. So Prabhupada wrote back, actually, you are not in Maya. You are doing pure devotional service because all the money is being used in the service of the Lord. Yeah. Right. Okay, so we've got 3 more verses left. Verses 10 and 11 are a subsection together. And the subject matter is, one has to work. It is impossible to give up all activities. So, okay, verses 10 and 11, let's read the 2 of them. The unintelligent renounce the situation. Oh, sorry. Hare Krishna. Let me take that back. The intelligent renouncer situated in the mode of goodness, neither hateful of inauspicious work, nor attached to auspicious work, has no doubts about work. And 11, it is indeed impossible for an embodied being to give up all kinds of activities. But he who renounces the fruits of action is called one who has truly renounced. Okay, that's interesting. All right, so verse 10 again. The intelligent renouncer situated in the mode of goodness, neither hateful of inauspicious work, nor attached to auspicious work, has no doubts about work. So this is describing the wise renunciate, fixed in sattvic tyaga. Yeah. Intelligent, yeah. Right, so he is the wise tyag renunciate. Prabhupada says, a person in Krishna consciousness or in the mode of goodness does not hate anyone or anything which troubles his body. He does work in the proper place and at the proper time without fearing the troublesome effects of his duty. Such a person situated in transcendence should be understood to be most intelligent and beyond all doubts in his activities. Yeah. So Prabhupada mentions in the purport, well, actually, not actually exactly, but in the Sanskrit, the term in the first, two terms are used. Akushalam karma or kushale karma. Kushala karma. Akushala and kushala. Inauspicious and auspicious. So, akushala means activities which bring about suffering, like taking bath in cold water in the winter, just to give an example. You know what done a few times when we're on traveling book distribution. In Northern Ireland, a few times we broke the ice on a lake in order to get water, which we just immediately, from the lake, we just took bath. I'm sure if I did it now at this age, I would get some serious, type of flu or pneumonia or something. But that's what we did. Taking bath in the winter, even though it's cold, we don't mind. We don't mind. And neither are we attached to activities which give pleasure, like in very hot weather, having a cold bath. Oh, I've done it on many occasions in Vrindavan, in Mayapur, in April during the parikrama. Wow, it's just such nectar to have a cold bath. You just carry on and on. Right. So, but the intelligent renouncer is just either way. You got to take a bath, you take a bath. Yeah. So through intelligence in Krishna consciousness, this devotee has no doubts about what to do or not to do. And verse 11, it's indeed impossible for an embodied being to give up all activities, but he who renounces the fruits of action is called one who has truly renounced. Yeah, okay. So this is reaffirming the point made in chapters 3, 5, 6, and 12. The same point has been made, sometimes in slightly different ways, but it's the same point. It's easily recognizable as the same point. And the point is that one has to work. One cannot just give up all activity. One has to work. It's impossible to give up all activities, particularly chapter 3, verse 5. I don't know if you remember it. Krishna says, everyone is forced to act helplessly according to the qualities he's acquired from the modes of material nature. Therefore, no one can refrain from doing something, not even for a moment. So a true renouncer works for Krishna and offers everything to the Lord. And many ISKCON devotees do like this. And in this context, they can be considered sannyasis. And finally, verse 12, which is the last verse in the section. And the idea here is the result will be that one will transcend. This will be the result of acting like that. All right. So let me just read the verse then. For one who is not renounced, the threefold fruits of action, desirable, undesirable, and mixed, accrue after death. But those who are in the renounced order of life have no such result to suffer or enjoy. Whew. This is very important. Right, yes. So for the devotees, well, Prabhupada says, a person in Krishna consciousness, acting in knowledge of his relationship with Krishna, is always liberated. Therefore, he does not have to enjoy or suffer the results of his acts after death. Oh, Krishna. No. So he doesn't get those results of enjoying or suffering the results of his activities after death. But he does get the result of transcending the modes of material nature and in this way going back to Godhead, entering his or her eternal relationship with Krishna, the perfection of life. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. All right.